Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. What are phantonyms? And what are false friends? Let's find out about these common challenges for English learners on today's episode of Thinking in English. Head to thinkinginenglish.blog for the full transcript of today's episode, and have a look at my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast, for more great English content. Here is today's episode. Earlier this week, I was having a conversation with a friend about sports when he told me he was disinterested in an upcoming boxing fight. Disinterested. Now, most of you would probably assume that my friend had no particular interest in the boxing fight. In other words, he didn't really care about it and wasn't planning to watch it on TV. And that is exactly what he meant. However, he made a very common English mistake. A mistake that English speakers, even great speech makers like Barack Obama, make all the time. He used a phantonym. Disinterested is a phantonym, a word that seems to mean one thing, but actually means something else. As an English learner, you have to be careful to avoid the traps and tricks within the English language. There are many pieces of vocabulary and grammar which can be easily mistaken, misused, and confuse even native speakers. And phantonyms are one of the most challenging features of English. Now, what do you think disinterested means? Most people, including myself in the past, I guess, would probably assume that disinterested means that you have no interest in something. Dis is a prefix that can be used to make something mean the opposite. Think about like and dislike. So, disinterested must be the opposite of interested, right? Well, wrong, kind of. Uninterested is the opposite of interested. Disinterested actually means that you have no self-interest in something. You are neutral, impartial, unbiased. It does not mean you are uninterested, but that you don't have any personal involvement or connection to whatever you are talking about. So, if you are uninterested in that boxing fight, it means you don't care about it. You're not going to watch it. If you are disinterested, it means you don't support either fighter. You might still watch it, you might still want to watch it, but you don't mind who wins. The difficulty here comes from the fact interest has more than one meaning in English. The word phantonym was invented in 2009. If you've been studying English for a while, you've probably heard of synonyms, so words that have similar meanings like happy and ecstatic. You may also have heard of antonyms, words that have opposite meanings, so happy, sad, or big, small. And homonyms, words that have the same pronunciation and or spelling, but different meanings. So two, and two. It's hard to listen to, but if you can read it in the transcript, you'll see what I mean. In a 2009 New York Times article, Jack Rosenthal proposed phantonym as a new type of word, a word that looks as if it means one thing, but means quite another. He wrote he wrote his article after then President Barack Obama gave a speech which included the phrase "a fulsome accounting." Obama, one of the greatest speechmakers and public speakers in recent years, fell into the trap of using a phantonym. He meant a full accounting. Fulsome doesn't necessarily mean full. It often means insincere or excessive. Even though fulsome looks like it means full, it has quite a different meaning. The point of this episode is not to scare you as an English learner, but to demonstrate that even native English speakers need to be careful about using words that they don't really understand. I often proofread applications or resumes that include misused or poorly chosen words. And most of the time, this is because the writer used words they don't actually understand. They probably just went on Google and searched synonym for good and then chose a random word for the list, but they don't know really what it means. Similar to phantonyms are false friends. False friends are perhaps even more of a problem for all of you listening, for English learners. A false friend is a word in a language that tricks learners into thinking it has a certain meaning because it looks similar to a word in their own language. In other words, false friends are a pair of words in different languages that look or sound similar but have different meanings. Now, that's a little bit confusing. So let me give you a few examples to make things clearer. Think about the English word embarrassed and the Spanish word embarazada. Although they look similar, embarazada actually means pregnant. So it would be a really big mistake to confuse embarrassed and pregnant. Think about the English word gift, the German word gift, which means poison, and the Norwegian word gift, which means married. For a learner, a German English learner or a Norwegian English learner who sees the English word gift, meaning present, I give you a gift at Christmas. Well, if you give someone a gift in Germany, it's got a very different meaning, right? False friends can be a real challenge for language learners, as you think you know the word, but actually you don't know the word. You think you know what the word means, but actually you don't know what the word means. I remember ordering a cider from a restaurant menu after I first moved to Japan in 2016, and I expected to receive an alcoholic drink made from apples, as this is what cider always means in the UK. Cider in the UK is always alcoholic apple alcohol. In Japan, it's not. Instead, I was given a sweet soda, which is what cider means in Japan. I fell victim to the false friend of cider and cider, one meaning alcohol, one meaning soda. For those of you who regularly write or speak in English, phantonyms and false friends can cause issues as they alter or change the meanings of your sentences. However, sometimes phantonyms are so commonly misused that the meaning has gradually begun to change. And dictionaries will even now include the informal or mistaken meanings as well. And also, I tend to not really care about the rules of language too much. If people use words and understand them, then I think that is fine. However, it is interesting to learn that certain words do not mean or do not always mean what you think. And if you were to study at some very elite universities, I'm thinking Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, the professors at those universities might be a little bit more picky about your language than I am. And they might question your choice of words if you have incorrectly used a phantonym. So now I'm going to introduce some of the most common phantonyms in English. I've already talked about disinterested and fulsome, so I won't repeat these here. These words they're not simple words, but they are words you will definitely see if you were to read more advanced newspapers or books in English. And you'll notice that these are just phantonyms, two English words or English words that can be easily confused. I haven't made a list of false friends because you guys all speak so many different languages. So I'll explain after this at the end what I'm going to do about false friends. But let's get into the phantonyms right now. Noisome. Noisome sounds and looks like it should mean noisy, loud, or something similar. However, noisome is actually related to the word annoy instead of noise. So, noisome is used to describe something that smells terrible or is generally unpleasant, not something that is noisy. For example, the dog's noisome odor made me feel sick. Suffrage. Suffrage. Suffrage looks like the word suffer, but it has a very different meaning. It actually means the right to vote. Suffragettes were the women who fought for their rights to vote last century. And now, in most democracies, people of the age of 18 have suffrage. They have the right to vote. For example, the new law will guarantee universal adult suffrage in the country. Invaluable. Invaluable. In is a prefix often used to make a word mean the opposite or negative, such as insincere, incorrect, or inexpensive. Therefore, invaluable must mean the opposite of valuable, right? Well, actually, no. Invaluable means something is very, very valuable or very, very useful. It is so valuable or so useful that it is difficult to give a value to it. It is valuable beyond estimations. For example, he is an invaluable employee of this company. Inflammable. Inflammable. People often assume that inflammable means the opposite of flammable. But actually, they are synonyms and they mean the same thing, even with that in prefix. If something is inflammable, it easily catches fire. Flammable and inflammable tend to be used interchangeably in English, so there is a very good chance you may see these words on products you buy in the future. For instance, careful, the building is full of inflammable materials. Enormity. Enormity, in its original meaning, refers to an immoral or illegal act, especially the scale, extent, or seriousness of a immoral or illegal act. However, most people tend to assume enormity has a similar meaning to enormous. In fact, so many people have misused the word enormity that most dictionaries now include a second meaning of the word, referring to a large size. However, the original or real meaning is only referring to the extent of an illegal act or an immoral act. For example, the enormity of his crimes is shocking. Fortuitous. Fortuitous sounds like fortunate, so many people assume that they have the same meaning. But actually, these words are not the same. While fortunate refers to good fortune, such as being rich, attractive, in love, having a good job, fortuitous refers to something that happened by accident or chance, and can be positive or negative. People often use fortuitous instead of lucky to sound more intelligent, but they are actually misusing the word slightly. For example, you were not fortuitous to attend a good school. You were fortunate or lucky. However, if a friend told you about a scholarship to the school just before you applied, that was a fortuitous event. That was by chance or by accident. Going to the school was fortunate. Being told about the scholarship just before applying was fortuitous. So here is today's final thought. On this episode of Thinking in English, I have tried to talk about two of the most challenging features of a language: phantonyms and false friends. I then gave you a few examples of common phantonyms that even native speakers use incorrectly all the time. However, as my listeners speak a wide variety of different languages, I don't think I can make a list of false friends. Instead, I want you to tell me about any false friends between your language and English. If you speak Italian, Spanish, French, Vietnamese, Japanese, Korean, any language, Russian, Polish, what is a word in your language that looks or sounds similar to a word in English but has a different meaning? Such as the British cider, the alcoholic apple drink, and the Japanese cider, the sweet soda drink. If you leave a comment on the blog or on Spotify, or you send me a message on Instagram, I can keep updating this article, and I'll try to make a long list of false friends from languages all around the world. And I think it would be a really good opportunity for all of you to write a little bit in English, and try to explain the meanings of these false friends and why they are so confusing. So, yeah, please definitely tell me some false friends out of your languages. And yeah, leave them in the comments on the blog or on Spotify, or send me a message on Instagram.